High on a rocky promontory sat an electric monk on a bored horse. From under its rough-woven cowl, the monk gazed down into the valley, with which it was having a problem. The electric monk was a labor-saving device, like a dishwasher or a video recorder. Dishwashers washed tedious dishes for you, thus saving you the bother of washing them yourself. Video recorders watched tedious television for you, thus saving you the bother of looking at it yourself. Electric monks believed things for you, thus saving you what was becoming an increasingly onerous task, that of believing all the things the world expected you to believe. Unfortunately, this electric monk had developed a fault and had started to believe all sorts of things more or less at random. The problem with the valley was this. The monk currently believed that the valley and everything in the valley and around it, including the monk itself and the monk's horse, was a uniform shade of pale pink. Even more surprisingly, the monk believed Douglas Adams was working feverishly on a new book.
One of my favourite remarks about writing, I think, came from Ring Lardner, the American sports writer who was part of the Algonquin Round Table, and he said, writing, there's nothing to it. It's very simple. All you have to do is get a sheet of paper and stare at it till your forehead bleeds.
When I first was sent over to see Douglas, I was actually told that the last book, which he had written, he'd had to be locked in his hotel bedroom for a month and not allowed out till he finished the book. And when I met him, he was already a month over the final, and absolutely beyond which you mustn't go final deadline. And he had 3 pages of the book written, so I knew that we had a job ahead of us.
I think writing makes him deeply unhappy a lot of the time. He finds it very, very difficult. And although in theory he takes, you know, 1.25 years to write a book, he really only writes them in 3 weeks. I mean, he does a lot of thinking and mucking around, and having baths is the maddening thing about when you work with him, because he's always got to have a bath, you know. He's always rushing off to... I think his book should be measured in baths, really. This took 150,000 baths to write.
Douglas emerged from the bath and went up to the study and just started writing. And it was absolutely extraordinary. I mean, he just powered right through. And about 1/4 of the book was written from that Wednesday. It must have been about 2 or 3 in the morning on Wednesday night, right through till Friday at 7 o'clock in the evening. And he just went solidly. And that was the end of tea time, and about 1/4 of the book.
But curiously enough, despite having sold 198 Scrigg-Resillian books, Douglas Adams still found it very hard to believe that he could actually write them. He needed other people, or things, to believe it for him.
One of the things that people say about you, they say quite publicly, quite rudely, so you'll have heard this many times, right, is that you're a terrible man to get to finish a book.
Well, actually, that story has assumed the proportions of an apocryphal story, and I have to remind people that it is actually true.
And as we speak now, you're struggling to finish the book we're going to talk about later in this program. Yeah. Does this come out of a feeling that a certain sort of desperation, a certain sort of tardiness is a help?
No, I would love to do without it. I mean, I have to recognize that some of the best stuff has actually come out of moments of desperation. Right in the early part of Hitchhiker, when Ford and Arthur are thrown out of a spaceship, it was a Vogon spaceship, with
30 seconds to go.
That's right, with 30 seconds to live. And, I mean, it's very much a sort of stock sort of soap opera, or space opera, sort of old-fashioned...
Perils of Pauline.
That's right. Yeah. But the thing I suddenly became worried about at that point, and terribly concerned about, absurdly over-concerned about, was that I've put them in an impossible situation, and that is what the sort of cliffhanger is. In which case, how do I get out of them without then saying, well, it wasn't actually an impossible situation after all?
Wait a minute. What's this switch? Where?
I was only fooling. We're going to die after all.
You know, it's at times like this, when I'm stuck in a Vogon airlock with a man from Beetlejuice about to die of asphyxiation in deep space, that I really wish I'd listened to what my mother told me when I was young.
Why? What did she tell you?
I don't know. I didn't listen.
Terrific.
And I got completely and utterly stuck. I'm now stuck for days on this and wonder what the hell am I going to do. And then I happened to be seeing a television program about judo. And the instructor was explaining something rather interesting. He said, when you have, you know, some sort of huge 18-stone opponent throwing themselves at you, the answer is to use the weight of your opponent against himself. So if he's launched himself through the air at you, try and make that his problem rather than your problem. And I thought, no...
You mean dodge?
That's right, yes. And so I thought, now there's something interesting here. Use the weight of the problem against itself. So I went back to this thing and thought, well, what is the problem here? Any answer I come up with to how they escape is basically very, very improbable. And the improbability is the problem. Okay, use that problem, make the problem the solution. So I then came up with this thing called the infinite improbability drive, which is the thing that then causes them to be rescued, but also then gives an immense new impetus to the plot at that point.
Please do not be alarmed by anything you see or hear around you. You are bound to feel some initial intellect as you have been rescued from certain death at an improbability level of 2 to the power of 260,199 to 1 against, possibly much higher. We are now cruising at a level of 2 to the power of 25,000 to 1 against, and falling, and we will be restoring normality as soon as we are sure what is normal anyway. Thank you. 2 to the power of 20,000 to 1
This is fantastic. We've been picked up by a ship with a new infinite improbability drive. I mean, this is incredible, Arthur.
I think the most difficult thing about being a character in a Douglas Adams novel is not so much wondering what's going to happen next, as wondering if anything's going to happen next. You never really know if your character's going to develop into something really rather complex and interesting, stop dead and never be mentioned again, or just unexpectedly turn into a Coca-Cola vending machine. Plays havoc with your sense of motivation.
How do you think I feel? 1 minute I'm there being pushed around all the time. Open entry bay number 3, Marvin. Marvin, can you stay and fight off this gigantic battle machine? And then they run off and abandon me. Everything abandons me in the end. Even my body abandoned me, you know. Why do you think I'm sitting here in a moldy old raincoat? Every single bit of me fell off. Rather enthusiastically, I thought.
What do you think they're talking about up there?
Oh, the usual thing. I went to Cambridge, that was very interesting. I joined Footlights, that was very interesting. I left Cambridge, that was very interesting. They all lead exactly the same lives and say exactly the same things about it and then claim against all the available evidence that it's very interesting. You watch, I bet that's what he says.
Did you have any idea you wanted to be a writer before you went to Cambridge?
Pretty much. I think, I mean, it's one of these things I went through different versions of, and there was a time that I wanted to be a nuclear physicist, and another time that I wanted, wanted to be an engine driver or whatever. But I think the first time I ever saw John Cleese on television was just sort of a moment of, that's it. I'm as tall as he is. I can do that. That's what I'm going to do. Of course, it didn't actually quite work out that way because the world in its wisdom decided that it didn't want me to perform at it, and I think the world is probably right. So I ended up becoming just a writer, and of course, during my time at Cambridge, I developed and perfected the techniques of writing that were to stand me in very good stead in my later career, because I think during the entire 3 years I was at Cambridge, I actually managed to complete 3 essays. We had hoped to go and film inside St. John's College, Cambridge, where I spent 3 years as an undergraduate.